All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. As always, we're going to talk some key NFL injuries today, some stock up, stock down, and then we'll break down a loaded Drew Offensive Rookie of the Year market. But we're going to start with Jrue Holiday and the Celtics. So Holiday gets traded to the Celtics in exchange for Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, and a couple of firsts. The Bucs are still the favorites to win the East, which I don't necessarily agree with. But what do you think of the trade and the ripples into the outright markets?
I think, they put together, they tried to kind of shore up the big situation with the Porzingis trade, having three guys and hoping that two would stay healthy through the playoff run. I thought was a good strategy. You give away Robert Williams in this deal for Jrue Holiday. Jrue Holiday immediately, kind of backfills a void left by the departure of Marcus Smart. So that's good. But now they're a little bit fragile on the big side of things. If something happens to Porzingis this season, if he's if he has a bad luck year injury wise, then I'm a little nervous about how thin that the front court looks. But I think overall the Celtics ought to be favored. I thought they should have been favored before the Jrue Holiday trade, and Jrue Holiday is obviously a pretty important piece, particularly when it comes to point of attack defense. So nice move by the Celtics, I thought, most notably because it kept Jrue Holiday away from any of the other Eastern contenders.
Yep, I agree. And I think that the upgrade from Jrue Holiday and Grayson Allen and flexibility to Damian Lillard versus the upgrade from Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, and Grant Williams to Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, I think that's advantage Celtics. I mean, this team is just going to be stupid defensively. Like their sixth best defender is Jaylen Brown. That's completely insane. Jaylen Brown's been like an all-D candidate in prior years. He's their sixth best defender, which is nuts. Yeah, I think that this team, just with the superior depth to the Bucs, I think they're going to be. I think they're better conditioned to win in the regular season than Milwaukee, so I would make them favorite to have home court in any theoretical series against the Bucs. And I think they're just kind of better than the Bucs, full stop. And I think there's some skepticism around the Celtics because of, Jaylen Brown dribbling the ball off his feet in this playoff series against Miami, and people think Kristaps is kind of soft and hasn't done it on the big stage, and there's still some skepticism about Jason Tatum. And if they didn't have six outstanding players and it was 3 or 4 instead, then I'd be more concerned about that. But just the depth of elite talent, particularly that starting five, which is just crazy loaded with just two-way talent in particular. And I think there is some skepticism about Tatum in general and not considering him, the same level as Jokic or Giannis or Embiid. And I get that. But at the same time, Jason Tatum is, 24 years old?
Oh, yeah.
He's Jason Tatum's 3 months older than Desmond Bane. And Tatum's already like the 7th best player in the NBA. So he has scope to get better. And I think that the idea that he's not good enough to be the best player on a title team, I mean, he's got the best kind of 2 through 6 that any team has had in a very long time. And so that mitigates the fact that he's the 7th best player instead of the 3rd best player or whatever. So I think that this team should be favored to win the East. I think there's still value on their price to win the East at plus 200, on their price to win the title at plus 400. I don't think those are monstrous bets, but I would say that on average, the Celtics would be favored in the finals. I'm not sure. I would probably rather back plus 200 East, though, than plus 400 title. I would think that that's slightly more meat on the bone just going through the East. And the thing is with the East, unlike the West, there's just no one outside of Milwaukee that's threatening. I mean, the Celtics are going to be on average, minus 1,200 in round 1 and minus 300 in round 2 if they dodge Milwaukee. And then they'll be favored over Milwaukee if they have home court. I think this is the team to beat. Anything else on the Celtics, Drew?
Yeah, they got to dodge our magic too. Don't forget about that. Don't want the Celtics for whatever reason. They don't want to face the Magic in round 1. But no, I think all your breakdown is fair. I think the Celtics, they realistically should be thinking title or bust. I think that this being year 2 under Joe Mazzulla, it should matter. Right. There was pretty clearly some times in some series last year where it was like, boy, this is very clearly Joe Mazzulla's first run through this as the head coach. And with, a little bit of experience in his back pocket, he should be a bit better. And in general, like, the Celtics haven't really gotten very lucky injury wise the last handful of years. It always feels like Tatum ends the season like on the bubble of, is he going to get knee surgery, shoulder? Yeah. Like he's banged up, and now they've all had like a full season, off season, to just get right for this particular year. I think that sets up the Celtics pretty well, assuming that the front court guys can stay healthy, that you get a full season out of Horford and Porzingis. Then the Celtics are the team to beat in the NBA, but particularly the East. And I agree with your thoughts of just isolating East, because yes, the West is tougher. It's no guarantee that the Nuggets are going to make it back there, but boy, oh boy, do the Celtics have a defensive question about, well, how are you stopping Jokic in a final series if that's the matchup. So I think you're going to get the top overall seed. They'll probably have home court throughout the playoffs, and this is absolutely the team to be beaten.
Yeah. And just the last thing before we move off the Celtics, there's a popular sentiment that the Celtics are kind of soft in the playoffs and they don't take care of business. Like, it's just wrong. They're one of the most resilient teams that I've ever seen in the playoffs. The fact that 2 years ago they're down to Milwaukee after blowing Game 5, and then they go into Milwaukee and Tatum outplays Giannis in Milwaukee. Then they blow them out in Game 7. They win Game 7 on the road in Miami. Last year, their backs against the wall in Philly in Game 6. They're clearly a mentally tough team. Yep. They could have folded in the Miami Eastern Conference Finals as well, down 3-0. And then they tie that up 3-3, and they're 8-point favorites in Game 7 before Tatum sprains his ankle on the first play of the game, which I'm still upset about. I think that for any criticisms of the Celtics, I think it's more about late game offense and the fact that they have an issue with turnovers, specifically against Miami, and Jaylen Brown is probably a little. He shouldn't be, an elite number 2 option, I think. And he's not going to need to be now, because there's Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. And, Jrue Holiday, after being, the number 3 option in Milwaukee and often getting the best guard defender, I mean, now he's just going to be able to cook against much lesser defenders, I would think. So I think this is a great trade for Boston.
Do you think, are there any kind of like old school vet bigs that you think are going to want to work their way onto the Celtics? Because that again, like, I'm going to be refreshing Porzingis injury updates all season long, because that's the only thing that really scares me.
Well, they already got my man, Wenyan Gabriel, who's actually not terrible.
He's not bad, yeah.
Yeah, so, they just need spot minutes. Yeah, you just need a kind of a Daniel Tice kind of equivalent to soak up some regular season minutes. They'll be fine. So long as they'll have Kristaps on the rest plan, and he'll play, 60 games or whatever, and they'll get him right. And it looks like the foot issue that he was dealing with seems to be a non-issue. He's training and working out and everything, so he should be good to go. So yeah, all in Celtics. They'll be at the cheer again. They've been the cheer the past 2 years for me, and it's ended up okay for the most part. Certainly winning the East the first year. Last year, not quite as good, but I do think this is the best team in basketball. The Steelers are not the best team in football. Kenny Pickett was ruled out immediately on Sunday, Drew, with a knee injury. Looked a little MCL-y. It's not season ending, though he was seen with a brace. Looks like he's going to miss a little bit of time. Pat Frymouth did his hamstring as well and did not return. And then there's some just additional injuries on top of that for the Steelers. I mean, how screwed do you think this team is?
Well, I mean, the guys that they're losing, there's an argument to be made. This could be addition by subtraction. Kenny Pickett has been miserable this year. It doesn't look like he's playing anywhere close to the level we saw him finish last season. I don't know if there are issues at play beyond, the current knee injury, or if it's kind of a more easy to pin this on Matt Canada conceptual framework that it's predictable. It feels like the defense has the upper hand every single snap, particularly on first and long, first and 10 and second and long. And that obviously puts them in pretty difficult to convert third down situations. And Pickett looks like he's trying to do too much. Game's moving too quickly for him. I don't know that this is a downgrade to go from Pickett to Trubisky. as sad as that may be to say, that's the state of this offense. And, there again, maybe something going on with the way Trubisky was trying to press. He's pretty clearly been pressing all 4 games we've seen him so far. And if Trubisky's playing a little bit looser and, they are potentially, again, maybe a lateral, if not an upgrade, losing Dan Moore and bringing in Broderick Jones. He's been playing quite poorly so far this season. So I think there's actually scope for the Steelers to look a little bit better these next handful of weeks, even though, they're dealing with all of these crazy injuries here. We've seen this market against the Ravens really start to move pretty aggressively already. Look ahead, we were thinking something in the 3.5 range. It's drifted out to 5. It doesn't really seem to be much appetite to back Pittsburgh here, even though this is always a competitive contest, regardless of the records. Jay, I don't know if you know that about the Ravens and the Steelers, but there's no love lost. But ultimately, the big market move to the under makes sense here. And I think the fact that the Ravens are dealing with as many injuries as they are, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, is worth paying attention to here. So, I don't have a burning inclination to bet Pittsburgh this week, but I think as you evaluate this particular game and market, it's Pittsburgh or pass at this point.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things with Pickett to Trubisky. One, I think Trubisky is favorite to give the Steelers just a better baseline of play than they've gotten from Kenny Pickett to this point, which is about the second or third worst quarterback in the league in that kind of holy trinity with Desmond Ridder and seemingly
Joe Burrow so far. Joe Burrow's in the mix now, man.
Yeah, AFC North quarterback. He hasn't been great outside of Lamar Jackson. But I also think that just Trubisky, there's no upside. There's no upside in Trubisky. There's no variance. There's no chance that he can be, a top 12, 14 quarterback in the NFL, I would have thought. And there was that hope, at least from Kenny Pickett, just because there was less of a sample and potential that, just with his youth, that he could take a step this season, even though it wasn't looking particularly likely. So, yeah, I would expect the baseline of quarterback play to improve, but also the upside has kind of disappeared. The upside has also seemingly disappeared for the Patriots. Matthew Judon has torn his biceps tendon, is going to be out seemingly long term. Christian Gonzalez dislocated his shoulder, is expected to miss some time as well. And that's the good side of the ball, where those injuries are happening. Mac Jones was benched in the second half for Bailey Zappi and played maybe the worst game that Mac Jones has ever played. The Patriots, what's the read on them going forward?
I mean, this has got to be rock bottom. Bill Belichick's biggest blowout in his career, amazingly. Didn't kind of rationalize that as it was happening, and really didn't watch much of the game because once it got out of hand, there was not really any point. If you didn't already know, the Cowboys are tremendous front runners. They can put away a lead. Let me tell you, you give them 2 touchdown scores and you want to make it 4, they can make that happen. So the Patriots were a little bit kind of at the whims of Cowboys piling on, but the defensive injuries are interesting because those are 2 pretty important players. However, I would look at the rest of the depth on the Patriots defensive side of the ball and just their ability to scheme interesting ways to get the best out of their some of their not name brand players. And my gut says that Belichick will be able to backfill the absences of Judon and Gonzalez just fine. The bigger question is the offense even fixable? The one bright spot that they had all season was week 3. And even in that game, they only got to 15 points. But it did feel like they at least got competent play out of their offensive line. And if you have Mac Jones running for his life, it doesn't, he's not a guy that can operate the way that Tom Brady could in terms of get the ball out in 2 seconds and really create more creative ways to avoid the pressure. And so as soon as the offensive line has reached this new low, I think that has kind of unraveled the entirety of the offense. They don't have speed. They don't have, true game breakers that they can really lean on the way that other, offenses that are going through some tough times with some bad O-lines can at least kind of get the ball in the hands of guys who are fast and, create a little bit of space and take some pressure off the offense in that regard. Patriots are completely unable to do that regardless of health. And looks like Cole Strange is going to miss more time. He might be the best of their offensive line interior pass blockers. Trent Brown's certainly the best of their tackles, but these guys are ailing and they're not playing well. And I think anytime they go get matched up against a team that has an elite pass rush like Dallas, that's what it's going to look like. And I think this is probably a decent opportunity to find a little something against a team in the Saints that are dealing with their own offensive issues and really haven't been, as good of a defense as people were expecting this season. I know that their defense EPA per play numbers look pretty good, but they've played some pretty woeful offenses, and it should probably look a little bit better. And I think just in general, the Patriots should be able to find a little bit of room to do something in this game because the pass rush isn't going to be quite as violent. And therefore, Mac Jones should be able to operate. I think, last year at this time when they were, truly lost offensively in terms of what they even wanted to try to be, I had more concerns, I guess. The pulling of Mac Jones in the Bears game in primetime for Bailey Zappi was a lot more purposeful and kind of indicated, some sort of rift. I think that the benching of Mac Jones in the Dallas game there was no point in having him out there, and Belichick said as much. So I don't think it, to me, spells as much about a schism between coach and quarterback here as what I thought 1 year ago. All that said, they need to get right, and they need to get right quickly. I'm going to guess that the Patriots are going to be a bet onside this week because there are so many questions about what's going on with the Saints offense, and they're not going to be able to answer those against a very well-coached defense, even in the absence of Matthew Judon. So my inclination would be to watch this market, look for any news about the health and just a practice availability of some of the offensive linemen for the Pats. And if you're getting anything good there, then I think the Patriots are a bet under the key of 3.
Yep. I think it's probably time to almost give up on Mac Jones, the guy who was, I think I've been pro Mac Jones for a long time. I think in his rookie season, he was 10th in luck adjusted EPA per play. He had the 12th best PFF grade of all quarterbacks. He was legitimately above average quarterback. And then it was disastrous last season. It's been bad again this season. And I think he's probably just one of those guys who needs, a perfect context around him to succeed particularly in terms of offensive line play. He's never really had good receivers. But he's not someone who is, like most quarterbacks in the NFL, cannot overcome a context that's bearing down on him. Saints Patriots is about as depressing of a game as I can remember, because the teams aren't that bad. Like, there's still talent on them. When you get Cardinals Bears, you know what you're in for. But just Pats -1.5 home to the Saints with a total of 39.5 is just a little depressing all around. So I'm not sure there's much to grab from that game.
We'll get to some of the better, more exciting games this week, Jay, like Jets Broncos.
Yeah, the Jets Broncos might be a shootout, apparently, given that the Broncos defense suddenly is the worst in the league.
Justin Simmons is coming back this week. Broncos are going to turn it around.
That's true. Yeah. Still don't understand how Zach Wilson outplayed Patrick Mahomes in prime time, but it did kind of happen. Okay, before we get to the Saints' rival in the NFC South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, get your popcorn ready for Sunday night, Drew. All the stars will be out in Northern California when Micah Parsons and the Cowboys clash with Christian McCaffrey and the 49ers. Coverage of this battle between two of the best teams in the NFC begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 3-1, Drew. So we get into stock up, stock down. They are co-favorite, outright favorite some places in the NFC South, co-others with the Saints. Their win total is 9.5, and they are a favorite now to make the playoffs. So do you think this team is real? And if you do or you don't, what do you think is the best way to bet them?
So I'm going to go not real. But that also doesn't mean that they can't very well win a very bad division. They very, very easily could win the NFC South because Saints aren't running away with this thing. Falcons, quarterback play is obviously an enormous problem, which means they're relatively one-dimensional and can't come back from deficits. And the Panthers are the worst offense in football. It's not even about Bryce Young. It's not even about the offensive line or the lack of skill position players. Like, what they are trying to do does not make sense for modern football. So I don't think they're going to ultimately turn it around this season anytime soon. So yeah, the Bucs are a bad team that could win a bad division. And they are dealing with a number of injuries that I think matter. Their secondary is pretty beat up right now. I know that, you got pretty solid play from Vita Vea and Devin White coming into the game against the Saints when those guys were question marks. But they've lost more secondary depth now here. So they are really down to some true replacement level players. And that's going to put a little bit of pressure on Baker Mayfield to continue to score with this offense. I know Mike Evans went out of the game and did not return. I know that's not expected to be an especially long-term injury, but boy, oh boy, does he matter. Especially because his skill set marries pretty well with what Baker Mayfield is trying to do. And I think, just in general, a bye week for the Bucs is probably good because the other NFC South teams are probably going to lose. And so, I think obviously 2 coin flips there with the Saints potentially, in and around to pick them against the Pats. And then, the Falcons still somehow, some way, a small favorite against the Texans right now. But I think the Buccaneers, I need to start to see some pretty positive reports about how that secondary is coming along health-wise in order to give them an upgrade to being like a league average team. And if they're up against a team that has elite D-line, good pass rush, then it's kind of an auto fade for me with the Bucs right now.
Yeah, I think the sneaky thing with the Bucs is that last year they just had no pass rush whatsoever after Shaq Barrett went down, and he's back and he's playing well. And the secondary is competent enough, and Baker has been competent enough, and Evans and Godwin are good, and the tackles have been fine, and they're just kind of an average-ish team. And average-ish in the NFC South is enough to make you the favorite when you've got, a relatively easy schedule to come. Certainly not super difficult. And so I think if you believe in the Bucs, and look, they're a very uninspiring team and they don't generate any buzz, so that's why this is going to be difficult. But Todd Bowles is 18-1 to win Coach of the Year. That team's win total coming into the season was 6.5.
Yeah.
And I do think there is some narrative. If they go 11-6, which they only have to go 8-5 against the easiest schedule the rest of the way to get to 11-6. If they win the division and clear their win total by 4.5 wins, and when everyone expected that they would be a rebuilding team and they actually improve by 3 wins the year after Tom Brady leaves, I think there might be some narrative push for Todd Bowles. I mean, again, they're just such an uninspiring team. And I don't think people think that Todd Bowles is a great coach because he's makes so many conservative decisions. But I do think there is something simmering there. And I do think he should be actually a top 5 favorite for that award. And for instance, you compare him to, say, D'Amico Ryans, who is half of Bowles' price right now. Well, those teams have the same win total coming into the season.
Yep.
The Bucs are the favorite to win their division right now, and the Texans are the 4th favorite to win their own division. So, and I understand, look, D'Amico Ryans, I think, is more beloved by the media and just has a bit more kind of buzz around him, and that's a more exciting team. But the Bucs are more likely to get to 11 wins and much more likely to win their division. So I think that kind of balances out, and those guys should be similarly priced. So, yeah, I think there is a little bit of value betting the Bucs that way on Todd Bowles. The team that plays in D'Amico Ryan's division, the Jags, salvaged their season somewhat. Had they lost that game to Atlanta, all of a sudden it would have been kind of panic stations if they're 1-3 with losses to the Texans and Falcons on their resume. But they win that, all of a sudden stay as favorite in the AFC South in a week where 3 of those teams won. So they needed to keep pace there. They're now 5.5-point dogs at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium against the Bills. Do you believe in the Jags at plus 150 to win the division?
I do. The big question is bet it now or wait for this particular contest to come and go, because Yeah, I mean, there's been betting sentiment, market sentiment already that it looks like this is going to push its way to 6. Bills are in a really just a brutal travel spot. I mean, we'll break this game down more later this week, I suppose, but kind of terrible to take a home game away from Buffalo and give it to the Jaguars in London effectively, as the Jaguars are staying there and the Bills have to travel to London, which is a non-trivial trip. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, the expectations I had for this offense coming into this season were a lot higher than they have delivered to this point. Like, this offense is still seems very stuck in mud. And it's confusing because they have an elite set of weapons to work with. And Trevor Lawrence has been excellent at evading pressure. He finally got it going on the ground with his legs, which is sort of kind of a dynamic skill set that he brings to the table that the Jags have never really asked him to use for some reason. And I think if he's adding that layer to this offense, otherwise, then they are going to continue to improve and should get better. I think where I've been disappointed with the Jags so far this season is it really hasn't felt like Peterson has come into any of these games with really good game plans for their specific opponents. And I know that they're dealing with injuries on their offensive line in terms of availability. Suspensions and injuries have decimated that unit to a degree, but you're playing around it fine. It's just that you can't seem to necessarily sustain drives, and you're getting a little bit unlucky when it comes to caught passes, turnovers, things like that. So maybe things just get better by regression for regression's sake. But I think you have to look at their, what they've done so far this season and tip your hat to the defense being better than we expected, and the offense being kind of subject to bad luck. And if their luck turns around, and particularly if they get a win against the Bills, who are the hottest team in football. I don't know if you know that, Jay. I don't know if you heard that, but they just beat the Dolphins. Jags win in this spot as 6-point dogs would really swing that division in their favor pretty heavily. So I'm maybe more inclined to just take the points. I think it's going to be a competitive game in London with the situation that you're looking at here travel wise. But ultimately, they're the bet on still for me in division. The big question is, who's the second best team? And right now, with health and performance, I think you have to say it's the Texans. But I'm really struggling to figure out how these guys ought to be ranked after the Jags.
Yeah, I think the Titans flashed more upside on defense than I think was foreseeable going into that Bengals game. Maybe the Bengals are just terrible, and we'll get to them in a second. But I do think the Titans just still, with the amount of talent on that team, with Vrabel, trust them more than the Texans and the Colts, and trust any of these teams, to be honest. But yeah, I believe in the Jags. I mean, so far they are 7th in EPA per play as a defense. And Lawrence has the second best PFF grade of any quarterback, and there's still that huge disparity between their success rate on offense, which is good, and their EPA per play, which is terrible. So I think that's just luck. And they're just getting unlucky, and they've been bad in high leverage moments. And I don't think there's anything to suggest that is representative of what the team will be going forward. So I believe in the Jags. I think they're one of the 10 best teams in the league, and I'm not sure anyone else in that division is one of the 20 best. So I do think they've got a harder schedule because they did somehow win that division last year. They have a harder schedule the rest of the way, but it's not that hard. So I think that they should be fine. And I think the plus 150 is a bet on for the Jags. And that's probably, I have to think about it a bit more, but plus 150 division versus minus 110 make the playoffs. I think that's probably pretty close, but I'm a believer in the Jags, and it does help a ton, to your point, that they don't have to travel 9 hours on a plane to play their formidable opponents in the Bills, so that will certainly help them. Team that needs some help right now, Drew, the Cincinnati Bengals, who are only 3-point favorites at the Arizona Cardinals, which if you'd asked me what I thought this line would be a month ago, I don't know,
double digits.
10.
Yeah.
Huge. They are now plus 600 to win the division. They're 1-3. They are 35-1 to win the Super Bowl after coming in as a top 5 favorite. Is there any sense in buying the Bengals at this point? Because they go Cardinals, Seahawks bye, presumably Burrow will be better after that, or do you think that this is just a write-off of the season at this point?
I'm leaning more towards the latter. The Bengals made a specific decision to try to push Burrow out there and through what he's dealing with. The one win they have against the Rams felt pretty lucky. And the, kind of the writing was on the wall as you looked at not just the film, but, just what are they trying to do conceptually against the Titans, that's the way they're going to be. That's the way they're going to play. Then it's pretty straightforward to prepare for, how to defend them. Right. You don't want to be quote unquote solved in this league. That's a bad place to be as an offense. And it feels like if the Bengals are unable to really attack downfield, then they're solved. And it's not even that, that they're not taking chances, taking shots, throwing balls. When they are, it's not realistic that they're completing those passes. And now, Higgins dealing with the ribs, I think, is not going to keep him out of games, but playing through as in a limited, without practice in a limited capacity is not great. And I think the offensive line has been a wild bust so far, considering the talent that they, and the resources that they poured into that unit here. So if you're up against a well-coached defense, which the Cardinals very much are, I think that you're going to be a little clunky. And I think that the Bengals defense can perform much better than we saw against the Titans this last weekend, which makes this one a pretty obvious look to the under for me. Until Joe Burrow has, complete ability to use his lower body to get, power into his throws. I think it's pretty clear that the market is overpricing these Bengals totals. And I think market a little slow on recognizing that the Cardinals are not a tanking bottom feeding team. They got beat by the mighty Niners pretty convincingly, but that probably should have stayed right around 14. And the defense in general, we've seen flashes from this season that that they don't belong in the conversation with the likes of the Bears and the Broncos. So I think the Cardinals can do just enough in this contest to keep it competitive. And I think the Bengals getting above 20 points would be a surprise to me. So under 45 is the look I like the best there.
Yep. And the Cardinals might have the quarterback advantage in that matchup with Burrow in his current state. Certainly Dobbs has been the better quarterback to date. I think the problem with the Bengals is that they already have 3 losses, including 2 to the teams most likely to compete with them for the division in Cleveland and Baltimore. So they're down half the tiebreak there. And still on their schedule, they have at Niners, Buffalo, at Baltimore, at Jacksonville, at Kansas City. They're going to be underdogs in all of those games. And then in addition, you got another game against Cleveland as well, Minnesota. There's just no real layups on the schedule. So I think the Bengals are in trouble and rightfully are well behind the Ravens in particular, but also Cleveland in that division. All right, before we get to Offensive Rookie of the Year, a reminder that Bet the Edge isn't the only show every weekday, Drew, during the football season. You can also check out the Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Barry, Connor Rogers, and myself. It airs live on Peacock at noon, re-airs at 4 p.m., and is available on our NFL and NBC Sports YouTube channel, as well as wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Offensive Rookie of the Year. This is the most loaded class I can remember in a long time, where we have a guy right now who has 501 receiving yards through 4 games and leads the NFL in receptions and would probably come 4th in Offensive Player of the Year if the vote were held right now. Yeah. And he's not a top 2 favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I'm not really sure he deserves to be either. Well, I don't think he projects to be in the top 2. CJ Stroud is the favorite at plus 175. Bijan 4-1. Puka Nacua plus 450. And then you get to Anthony Richardson and Devin Achane, who has been the best running back in football by PFF grade and can't even crack the top 4 of favoritism in this market. Yeah. I think those are the top 5. And then you get Zay Flowers. I liked him a lot more 2-3 weeks ago. Sam Laporta, by the way, is on track to have the greatest rookie tight end season in NFL history. And is 40-1 to win this award, and still probably no value at that price given the ridiculous field. What's your breakdown of this market?
Yeah, I didn't see this coming. offensive rookie of the year is absolutely loaded. Puka Nacua, man, that guy is unbelievable to watch.
Good.
He's unbelievable. And I get it. He has to be behind Bijan Robinson because of the potential for volume for Bijan, which maybe, Puka's, we've seen the most of it that we're going to see all season. Cup is expected to come back at some point, maybe even soon. And just in general, the Rams have a little bit more fragility with Stafford potentially, and one hit away from not being able to finish the season. And on top of that, you have enough weapons there that there's going to be a sharing of the volume. So I get it why he's third, but it is crazy considering what he's already done. Like, he's already banked an incredible season, and we're 4 weeks in. The CJ Stroud hype and love that we've seen to this point, and him rising to market favoritism off of 2 20+ point wins makes sense to me. I kind of teased a moment ago, like, I'm having trouble rating this Texans team. They are dealing with pretty aggressive injuries across the entire offensive line. It has not mattered at all. There is something about the way Bobby Solowick is scheming his offense in conjunction with CJ Stroud's ability to avoid pressure that 2 weeks in a row now, he has been completely clean. 0 sacks. It is incredible to kind of try to understand how they're doing it. I don't have an answer. I just know that if CJ Stroud if the game is going slowly enough for him that he can cleanly process and avoid pressure against the likes of TJ Watt and company, then there's really not any expectation that it's just his performance is going to fall apart at some point. You've seen emergence now from 2 weapons on that young receiving group with Nico Collins and Tank Dell looking like real players in this league. The expectation for the Texans before the season was, well, maybe if they can protect CJ Stroud, he'll be fine. But this is a team that's going to really lean on the running back, and Dameon Pierce could have 30 attempts a game. No, that's not the way they're playing at all. This looks like a pretty kind of more like a Shanahan type of system than I would have expected they could get off the ground with this group of players this quickly. It's the key thing I think to watch is what happens as some of the offensive linemen return. Is it sticky here to understand that CJ Stroud can avoid pressure? Because if he can, and the schedule is as soft as it is, then they could compete for an AFC South title. And, certainly this week, the betting market is in love with the Texans as they have come down from +3 to pick them in some spots.
Yeah, I think the way to approach pricing this market is, one, it runs through CJ Stroud because he's the quarterback who's playing at a pretty high level at the moment. So if you just get a 50th percentile outcome from Stroud, how often does he win? And to me, he wins a significant amount of the time. If he just hits his baseline from here and look through 4 weeks, he is 14th among quarterbacks in EPA per play, 15th in success rate, 15th in PFF grade, 22nd in completion percentage over expected. So he's been about the 15th best quarterback in football. And that's including a week 1 clunker against Baltimore, his first game where he's terrible. Past 3 weeks, he's been 5th in EPA per play. Oof. This is having no offensive line whatsoever. Now there's backups getting injured, so now it's the backup to the backup. Laramie Tunsil will come back. Titus Howard presumably will come back, and the offensive line situation will get better against what is a very easy schedule the rest of the way. And so if Stroud can do this with no offensive line, and look, there are some question marks where I think he's getting a little bit lucky and his completion percentage hasn't been great. But I think that should be balanced out somewhat by the schedule and by the offensive line getting healthier and better. So I think Stroud is more of a bet on than a fade at +175, which is crazy because Bijan and Puka and Achane are so good. The only guy who I'd dismiss at his current price point is Richardson at +650. I just don't. I would maybe even have him behind Achane. Here's the thing with Achane. If Achane just starts getting like 75% of the carries in the
wish he might
football, then all of a sudden maybe he just wins the award. And because apparently he can just break 50-yard runs at will. And then I don't really know what will happen to Puka Nacua's role when Cup comes back. There's just a lot of uncertainty. But I think the most stable thing is that if Stroud just continues playing as he has, then it's just so hard to beat him. And I think the only guy probably with the realistic ceiling to do so is Bijan. If Bijan is a top 2 running back in football and leads the Falcons to the playoffs in spite of his quarterback situation, maybe that can overcome Stroud being a rock solid average quarterback in the NFL. But yeah, I think this market is actually fairly well priced at the moment, which usually isn't the case when there are so many candidates in the field. But I think it's reasonably priced. I would probably bet on Stroud at plus 175 would be the bet that I would make if I had to make one. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, that checks out. And I guess the part of the equation that maybe I'm missing with my commentary is they've been in 2 really favorable game states now 2 weeks in a row, right? Some of the story might be different if they find themselves down 2 scores with this offensive line. And so I think that's kind of maybe the key in terms of finding a handicapping angle on the Texans broadly. If this team is winning, they should be able to put away a win. If this team is losing, then maybe we see the worst of Stroud. Just in general, rookie quarterbacks are going to have ups and downs. I'm not really ever going to bet into a market after a guy gets 2 20-point wins and he's at he's the market chalk. I think there are enough really good candidates at the top that this could flip a couple more times before we get to the finish line. So I think maybe let's say the Texans don't come out and do well to start against the Falcons, and he's forced into comeback mode and he throws a couple picks to AJ Terrell or Jesse Bates. Then all of a sudden I'd be more inclined to get him in the plus 250, plus 300 range after a bad performance, knowing that the Texans overall are going to get better as we get to the later part of the season.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one because I agree. I think he is plus 175, it's 36%. I think he's more than a 36% chance to win the award. But at the same time, I agree that you're probably better off waiting and getting more information because there are so many contenders in the market that he can't just plummet to minus 200 that quickly when there are so many guys who are so good. And so you're probably better off waiting and then maybe even betting plus 125 when he's fair price minus 170 or whatever. I think you're probably better off waiting on Stroud, even though I do think the price is a little big at the moment. Okay, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those watching on our NBC Sports YouTube channel. Please rate and subscribe if you're listening as a podcast. And also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick. We'll see you soon.